Understanding aperture. A guide for beginner photographers. As a beginner photographer, understanding the technical aspects of your camera can be quite overwhelming. One of the most important concepts to grasp is aperture. In simple terms, aperture refers to the opening in your camera's lens that controls the amount of light that enters. It not only affects the exposure of your photos but also plays a vital role in controlling depth of field. In this guide, we will break down aperture and help you understand its significance in capturing stunning photographs. What is aperture? Aperture is measured in f-stops, which are represented by numbers such as f1.8, f4, f8, and so on. These numbers indicate the size of the lens opening. The smaller the f-stop number, the larger the aperture and vice versa. Confusing, right? Just think of it as a fraction where the denominator gets bigger as the aperture gets smaller. So, f1.8 is a larger aperture than f8. Now, you may be wondering, why does aperture size matter? Well, it directly impacts two crucial aspects of your photo's exposure and depth of field. Controlling exposure. Aperture plays a significant role in determining the exposure of your photos. When you adjust the aperture, you are essentially controlling the amount of light that enters the camera. A larger aperture, smaller f-stop number, allows more light to enter, resulting in a brighter photo. On the other hand, a smaller aperture, larger f-stop number, restricts the amount of light, resulting in a darker image. Understanding how to control exposure is essential for capturing well-lit photos. It can be particularly useful when shooting in challenging lighting conditions, such as low light situations or when photographing subjects against a bright background. Manipulating depth of field. Another crucial aspect influenced by aperture is the depth of field. Depth of field refers to the portion of your photo that appears in focus. A large aperture, small f-stop number, creates a shallow depth of field, where only a small portion of the image is in focus, while the rest appears blurred. This effect is commonly used in portrait photography, where the subject is in focus, and the background is beautifully blurred, creating a pleasing bokeh effect. On the other hand, a small aperture, large f-stop number, creates a deep depth of field, where a larger portion of the image appears in focus. This is often desirable in landscape photography, where you want both the foreground and background to be sharp and detailed. Choosing the right aperture. Now that you understand the impact of aperture on exposure and depth of field, you may be wondering how to choose the right aperture for your photos. Well, it depends on the effect you want to achieve and the situation you are shooting in. If you want to isolate your subject and create a blurred background, opt for a larger aperture, small f-stop number, like f1.8 or f2.8. This technique is commonly used in portrait, macro, and food photography. On the other hand, if you want to capture a scene with everything in focus, choose a smaller aperture, larger f-stop number, like f8 or f11. This is often used in landscape, architectural, and street photography. It's important to note that different lenses have different maximum and minimum aperture values. If you have a kit lens, It might have a variable maximum aperture value depending on the focal length. Prime lenses, on the other hand, often have a fixed maximum aperture value throughout their focal range. Experiment and practice. Understanding aperture is not something that can be mastered overnight. It takes practice and experimentation to truly grasp its effects and how to use it creatively. Take your camera out and start experimenting with different apertures in various lighting conditions. Try capturing portraits with different levels of background blur or photograph landscapes with varying levels of sharpness. Remember, photography is an art form, and there are no hard and fast rules. Don't be afraid to break the rules and try something new. Some of the most breathtaking photographs were created by photographers who dared to experiment and think outside the box. Conclusion. Unleash your creativity with Aperture. Aperture is a powerful tool in a photographer's arsenal. It not only controls the exposure and depth of field but also allows you to unleash your creativity and add a touch of magic to your photos. By understanding how Aperture works and experimenting with different settings, you can take your photography to the next level. So, go ahead, grab your camera, and start exploring the world of Aperture. Let your imagination soar, and capture moments that will leave a lasting impression. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel and visit us at CatStorm Photography for more articles on photography techniques and to shop for high-quality photo equipment. Visit catstormphoto.com.